Welcome to the GRCISO podcast, your go-to resource for Chief Information Security Officers, CISOs, diving into the intricate world of cyber governance, risk, and compliance, of course, GRC. Join us as we unravel the complexities, offering expert analysis and industry insights to empower your decision-making process.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yav Berry, co-founder, CDO for Saipago. We are live at Blackhat on the floor, talking with our special guest for today, Tony Gonzalez, a former Fortune 500 CISO with tons of experience in leading GRC teams. We're going to have super fun conversation, and maybe as a starter, Tony, first, thank you for being here. Super excited to have you. The first question that I get as an entrepreneur, and it's an interesting one, how you, as a former hacker and reverse engineer doing low-level stuff, offensive security, kernel development, all of these, why the heck, from all the topics in the world, you chose to go for a cyber GRC venture? Because this is a more, I would say, high-level topic or domain. So for me, by the way, the answer is that in order to establish and build a decent security program, you have to know cyber very, very well. So this is my first question to you. We're here at Blackhat in the Hacker Summer Camp. What's the relation or connection between hacking, information security, offensive, etc., to GRC and security programs?
Okay, so first, thanks for having me as a guest. It was a really great. I'm happy to be here and do this. I think, when I look back on my background and my career, I started off in engineering, and not even in IT engineering, but in engineering. I was an industrial engineer for 10 years. And one of the things that I felt was always very powerful for me as I was moving into cyber and getting into some of the more senior levels, and was being able to talk to people and tell them, look, I've been in your chair, all right? I've done infrastructure, I've done applications, I understand what you're going through, and it's also helped me in the long run as a mentor, to be able to tell people, well, you may start off being very deeply engaged in the engineering functions.
Right.
But what's your goals and objectives? And if you want to get to that CISO level, along that way, you're going to drop some of the tools out of your toolkit and really switch in order to basically make that happen. And in order to make that happen, you really have to have that understanding from the deepest levels of engineering up to the highest levels of what a GRC program is and how you basically address governance, risk, and compliance using those tools that you've learned over the years.
Very interesting. Yeah, so I truly admire, this is like a confession, truly admire CISOs that came from like bottom up, that were hands-on, that were in red team, blue teams, engineers, even R&D. And I think it really helps. Also for me, by the way, I'm not a CISO, but I'm a security guy for 20 plus years. And when you combine the hands-on experience with like more of a strategic thinking, I think this is the way to build effective security program and sorry for being cheesy, but also make the work better. So I would like to take you, our audience, through a little journey today together. From the G to the R to the C. So maybe let's start with governance. The holy grail of cybersecurity, I think. So in particular, what's interesting for me is the 3 P's, like process, policies, process, procedures. So you have lots of experience in establishing security programs and GRC teams and initiatives. And I would like to understand from you firsthand, what do you think is the role of all of these documents and policies and process and procedures in establishing an effective GRC program and security program?
So I think there's a structural piece of this, right? If you look at overall, you know, practitioners like myself have always preached people, process, and technology.
The PPT, not the PowerPoint one, but
right.
Exactly.
That's right. So when you look at process, you look at procedures, you look at policy. Those are formidable documents that you use to connect the dots.
Sure.
So when you're putting a program together, you start off from a policy level, which the policy really wants to basically put together what the framework of your strategy is going to be and what your program is going to entail.
Mm-hmm.
Then you basically get into that procedure level, which is, or really you get into the process level, is how you're going to walk through that and make it happen. And then those procedures that are basically going to give you that detail, including what those controls are that you put in place in order to effectively manage that from a governance framework standpoint. This is becoming increasingly important for CISOs and senior leaders, because you're seeing an evolution where a lot of the actual execution doesn't happen within the CISO's direct organization. It happens within application. It happens within infrastructure. It happens within businesses now, especially with the onset of AI.
Exactly.
Right? So in order to pull that all together, you have to have that effective framework that you could communicate and then basically govern through the process for all those different people that are practitioners.
Totally. I totally agree. And you know, it's interesting that the business hall is just, you know, behind us. And there are so many tools, and, you know, the cyber industry, back in the day, we all know that you had this one team, like the SecOps, the SOC, all the SIEM tools. And now there are so many different domains and I would say areas within the cybersecurity, you know, realm. So what was very missing to me, honestly here, is you see very, like, lots of point solutions, but you cannot, like, see the, you know, the trees from the forest. Like, how does everything, your AppSec, your identity, access management, how all of this, or AI, how all of this together in a cohesive and holistic manner relates to your overall business strategy, risks, security program, controls, right? So almost most of these tools, they give you some functionality, but they do not tie it to controls at all or security program. And this is a challenge that we see in the market, that CISOs, we talk a lot with CISOs, and they lack this link from the point solution to the overall, you know, security program, policy, etc. So what's your take on this one?
When you're looking at the solution aspects coming from the vendors, you do need to basically ask the question, how is that making me more effective? How is it making me more efficient? How is it making me close a gap in some of the controls that we have in place? When you look at it from a control aspect, and you look at it and this ties directly into what you do from a regulatory perspective and compliance. Again, it's about connecting the dots, right? What is it that a regulation asks you to do? What is it that you have from a control perspective in place? And then how are you effectively governing, monitoring, and enforcing that control? And that's where the solutions come. So in my past, what we've done is put together programs that basically spell that all out. So if a regulator walks in the door, we say, you're asking me to do this. This is what we do, and this is how we do it based on the solution arrangements.
Exactly.
We used to call them rationale statements. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's how you effectively tie that bundle together.
That's great. So let's go back to policies. So how do you, we all know that life is dynamic. Things happen. And as part of the policy development and I would say adjustment, you have your desired state, like in Kubernetes, right? You have your desired state. So before we'll talk about the actual state and how you measure and enforce it, and you talk a little about it, how do you at least or even update your desired state? Because your desired state can be X today, and tomorrow can be Y and Z in like one month from now, because things are dynamic, people come and go, new technologies, new threats, the business is very dynamic. So how do you make sure that you can adjust and amend effectively the policies themselves? This is the question.
The biggest challenge is keeping them fresh and doing it frequently enough. So
manually, do you do it like manually, like updating the text?
A lot of it is done that way still.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some opportunities to do that in a more automated fashion. I think some companies have already done that, and there's some solutions out there that will do that for you. But in the most part, a lot of that is done manually. A lot of it is done annually and not on a real-time basis, which gets you in a position where play catch-up all the time, right? So one of the things that you always have to monitor is what's changing in the business and what's changing in your technical environment, right? So monitoring your change control, new projects, new major implementations, new upgrades of systems, because that'll change the dynamics of how your controls are implemented. And then it could change what you really want to say and do from a policy perspective.
Right.
Where you basically update the policies to say, we're doing actually something better now, or we've had to change our outlook on what we're doing from a policy perspective because of this new business dynamic or whatever. And it ties back to your risk management posture.
Right.
What your risk appetite is of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Highly regulated environments are going to be much more conservative. Product initiative type companies are going to be much less conservative as far as that goes, and change much more often. So that dynamic, it's all those things that you have to pull into that dynamic. Obviously, if you're following a specific framework, which I've always recommended to folks, and everybody said, well, is it NIST versus whatever?
NIST yourself, for example, or 853.
Right. Whatever the case may be, pick one.
As a baseline.
Yeah. Pick a baseline, draw your policies to those baseline, link what that baseline is telling you to do compared to the regulations that you're under.
Exactly.
You have to make sure those things are flowing in congruence.
Exactly.
Or if they're not, that's when you're going to have gaps, and that's when you're going to have problems.
Exactly. And you said one is the interesting thing. So I'm not going to delve into the, all the argument about like compliance versus security. But the one thing that everybody agrees on, I think, is the fact that essentially what you said, in order to establish your own security program, choose a framework, NIST, even, for smaller companies can be SOC 2. Set and define your control list, and then map them to the different frameworks that you have to be compliant with, and lots of work. As you know, a typical enterprise, they're using even dozens of frameworks that they have to comply with. So it's really, really challenging. And so, people sometimes see this as compliance, but many times those frameworks can really be the basis for your own security framework. And it brings me to CCF, like Common Control Framework. We know, and we talk a lot with CISOs that say, I need to be compliant, FedRAMP, PCI, whatever. But I also want everything to click together and have this list of controls that I continuously monitor. And I see, of course, the mapping to the different frameworks. So from your experience, have you set or built common control framework And if yes, what's your best tip of doing that?
I have. And again, if you're doing the right thing from a security perspective, you'll reach compliance. It's not the other way around, right? Because let's face it, most regulators, they'll say they want you to do something. They want you to have an MFA place. They want you to have, encryption at rest and in transit. But depending on the company you're with, the data, type of data that you're dealing with, et cetera, you're going to take some different levels of your security program based on like I said, based on the maturity of the organization, based on the risk profile of the organization, and you're going to use that and then say, well, that's how we reach this compliance. It may be much more than what the regulator's asking for, but if you start off at the regulation, you're going to wind up with security gaps, and you're going to wind up not really providing what your organization is looking for.
I agree. So you can start with the framework and then build and improve it, and I think you also don't want to work to do the same thing again and again, right? So if you have to have or set up MFA, you want to do it once and not one per framework, of course. So and by the way, I was here in a briefing. They actually said that still around 50% of the organizations, which is astonishing fact, I think, still do not set up MFA. Not MFA for applications, and not for VPN and things like that. So even the most basic stuff, it's hard to control. I call it, by the way, you have you know it very well. When you run an enterprise company, you have many tools: SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, cloud environments, on premises, the good old Active Directory is all this fun. And there is, I call it you can pick one of the mesh, the complexity, or the mesh, or I would say the jungle of IT. So even answering one very simple question like, does this or that user has MFA? You now have the IDP, you have the applications, not everything is set. So it's getting really, really complex for enterprises. And we talked about the policies. So how can we actually monitor those policies? So we talked about the desired state. Now let's talk about the actual state. And I think it links us also from the policy. It brings us from the policy to the controls, right? So how do you make sure that the written text in the policy is really enforced in an organization?
You have to have a mechanism for validating that your controls are in a steady state and they haven't changed. If your controls change, you might have a weak control where before you thought it was fairly strong and intact. And again, what's changed in the environment, and has that affected the control? That's the top level questions that you have to ask, right? Major implementations, upgrades of software, how do you tie in your change management process, your development processes and all that to basically trigger, wait a minute, something's changed and that might affect this control. We need to...
And it can even be a new product that you're building, or new service, or new business.
Absolutely.
Lots of things.
Absolutely. It could be an organizational change.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, there's so many dynamics that can change in an organization that could weaken your control set.
Right.
So it's really about understanding when those changes happen, and then how do you validate or revalidate that your control is in steady state and in good shape. Okay,
so this is a very important question, and this is an opportunity to say that there is a relatively new domain called CCM, Continuous Control Monitoring. So we at Saipago were named as and recognized as a vendor in the recent Gartner Hype Cycle report for cyber risk management, and in particular the CCM. So, and we see that these kind of things, back to what we just talked before about the different tools and the proliferation of tools, you have to be able to monitor with tools, with different tools, but then to map it back to your controls, right? So this is what the CCM is all about. So it's currently a challenge, and having a continuous control monitoring product, or I would say program, is something that can help. But I want to go back maybe to risk management. So for sure, you establish many risk management programs according to the business objectives. And how do you balance, and this is one of the main questions that I also have for CISOs, how do you balance the need for the business, I would say, growth, development, agility, with the risks that you have? Because, I'm saying it as a founder. For example, we have to go fast, and security and risk can hold us back a little bit. I just heard, by the way, this is news that Microsoft now is going to, I think, provide some benefits, or, they're going to encourage security practices and provide and actually give bonuses to different employees based on security, behavior or things like that, not just like get the work done, which is interesting because sometimes you want to get the work done.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes the security holds you back. So how, as a CISO of an enterprise, do you make this balance for like making or getting this business forward, but still defending it and having the liability, of course, of the security?
That's a really big question, but I'll try to boil it down for you. When you're dealing with those things, it's always that case. It could be simply new product launches by a business. It could be merger and acquisition or divestiture work that's going on. And the finance people want to see close right away. But whenever you do these things, back several years, it was, the security teams, risk and compliance teams always being looked at, the phrase was always used, the team of no, right? And what really is, it's not about yes or no, it's about how, right? So it's like most of the time, it's not really no, it means, but the way you're trying to do it and the approach that you're taking needs to be tweaked a little bit so we can deal with this and not severely increase the risk of the organization. And that's been the way that I've always tried to approach that with other teams, and it's the most successful way to get buy-in in order to do it. One of the things that is lacking most of the time is that there's not a real open communication with the senior leaders that have vested interest in the initiative that's going on, to truly let them know what the risks are that they're about to take on. A lot of times, and if you talk about it as far as, well, there's identity risk or there's that stuff just goes over everybody's head. What you have to basically have them understand that there may be some real jeopardy to the product that they're doing. There could be real jeopardy to the reputation of the organization. There could be real jeopardy to the actual outcome that they're trying to achieve. And if you're not real clear on that, and if you don't link that, it's going to be a bad situation.
Exactly. You have to talk their language.
Absolutely. And that's the big thing from a CISO perspective, is that you have to basically know who your audience is.
For sure.
You have to be able to talk to technical people one way, the mid-level managers one way, and senior leaders and board of directors another way. Because you have to make the message unilateral across those groups, but at the same time, you have to do it in detail on one end and very succinct on the other.
Totally agreed. And this is where GRC shines, I think, to look at the holistic, the whole picture of the security program and not just, on specific. Because, again, like you start from the business goals and not from this vulnerability. Nobody cares. Like if this vulnerability isn't going to be like, used or whatever, nobody cares. But if it poses a risk to the management, to financial reputation, exactly like you said, everybody you'll have the buy-in internally, right?
Yeah.
In the organization, and you'll drive the change.
And another point too is, clearly making everybody understand that as a CISO or a security practitioner or a risk practitioner, you're not the one that really owns the risk. You own part of it, but they own it too.
So this is exactly, by the way, our quest here in Sao Paulo. I want to thank you so much, Tony, for being here and having this great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I hope you like it, and see you in the next episode of GRC.
Thank you for tuning in to the GRCISO podcast, where we equip CISOs with indispensable insights about cyber GRC. This podcast is sponsored by Cypago, the enterprise tool for cyber GRC automation. Produced and edited by Tova Devorin and Yahav Perry. Intro-outro recorded by Keith Abramson. Distribution by Podbean. For more info, check us out at www.cypago.com.